Week 5 of the college football season is upon us. We will be discussing a matchup that features two teams that are seemingly headed in opposite directions in the Louisville Cardinals and the Boston College Eagles. We will begin preview talk by doing it what we always do, that is discussing what is at stake for the Louisville Cardinals in this matchup. So with that being said, let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Happy Friday. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode is brought to you by Underdog. Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com with the promo code Locked On and get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. It wouldn't be preview talk if we didn't discuss, like we do every week, what is at stake for the Louisville Cardinals against insert opponent here. This week, it's week 5 against the Boston College Eagles. We'll discuss kind of why the stakes are pretty similar to that matchup against South Florida. And then the second and third segments of the show will be dedicated to identifying the key players to watch. So what's at stake here for the Cardinals? Well, to understand, you obviously kind of have to have a feel for where the season is at right now. After a third of the season, the Cardinals are sitting at 2-2, which full transparency, through 4 games, I had Louisville at 3-1 in my predictions. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The team that I predicted wins to, or the teams that I predicted wins over, Florida State and Syracuse, were losses, and I had predicted a loss to Central Florida, and look at where we're at now. But regardless, the team's at 2-2. The story of last week was, go out and win. Go out and look impressive, improve on the things that you've been struggling with, so on and so forth. And you got the win. You did what you needed to do. You did it in a convincing fashion. I mean, you won 41-3. The offense was consistent for the most part. They, scored early on. Defensively, I mean, what is there to be said that hasn't been said already? It was a completely dominant performance by the Cardinals defense, only allowing a second half field goal, not even garbage time points. So that's good. Do it again. That is kind of the mantra for me, is handle business. In this part of the season, in this stretch of games, it's all about handling business. It's improving confidence and increasing momentum, or I should say increasing confidence and momentum as you head toward the back half of the schedule. Right now at 2-2, this is a game in the Louisville schedule to where it's, you're expected to win. The next 2 games you are expected to win. Boston College, for those who weren't aware, the line on this game opened up even higher than the line against South Florida. South Florida was like, I think it was anywhere from 13 to 15 points on average. The Cardinals opened up at like a 17.5 point favorite, or a 16. I think it was a 16.5 point favorite over Boston College. And currently on ESPN, as of late Thursday evening, it's at 14.5. So statistically, Vegas believes that Louisville should win this game more than they should have won last game, if that makes sense. They had better odds to win this game than they had odds to win last game. So a lot of it's the same thing, right? There's not a lot to gain in a matchup like this, but there's a good amount to lose. Anytime you're playing a team that you're supposed to beat, there's not a lot to gain from it, because if you win that game and you win it convincingly, you're supposed to. I mean, you were a double touchdown favorite. Of course you were supposed to win the game. You were supposed to win the game, pretty convincingly. And if you did that, well, it's pat on the back, bravo, move on. And that's okay if that's what happens. Obviously, that beats the alternative, right? But there's not much to gain here in this setting. A win over Boston College may be a little sweeter than the win over South Florida because it's a conference opponent and it would be your first conference win. So maybe that has some weight. I'm sure it does. And you create a little bit of a winning streak. So the factor of to gain here, it's about, number one, handling business. Doing what you're supposed to do, going out up on the road and winning this game. And you can, increase confidence, increase motivation, or not motivation, but momentum. One thing that, when you break down that South Florida victory, I mentioned over and over and over on Sunday, I said, look, was it a good win? Yeah, of course it was. Did you improve on a lot of things? Of course you did. And, it was a dominant performance, but against let's be honest, a team that's probably not good, now 1-3. How much can you truly take away from that? Because, we saw last year, we talked about the parallels on that episode when Louisville went down to Durham and smacked Duke in the second to last regular season game of the year and then played Kentucky and got throttled. It kind of offers maybe a little bit of a false hope. So I think that, you can't necessarily, I don't know, you can't necessarily take too much from that South Florida game and say, well, the team is on the rise. That might be true, and the improvements were there and everything like that, but you also have to factor in the opponent that they're going to be playing. And honestly, if they beat Boston College, you could probably say the same on this segment when we discuss the game against Virginia next week. But like I said, it's a matter of handling business because some teams don't. It is what it is. So I think that at the end of the day, for me at least, there's just not a lot to gain. And that's okay because if you're a double-digit favorite, that should be good. Obviously, it might be a trap game because you're playing in your second ACC road game because the first game of the season was a road game. Sure, Dalton learned the schedule. But you get where I'm coming from here. Just because there's not a lot to gain doesn't mean that you don't go out and you handle business. And a win is a win is a win. If you win by 1, if you win by 31, it is what it is. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't dissect that game and talk about the positives and the areas of improvement or the room for improvement. But it's about handling business. There is a good amount to lose in this one, though. If you were to lose, there's a lot at stake in that situation. Number one, a win over South Florida put the fan base at bay for the moment. South Florida was always supposed to be a victory. It was a dominant performance. So I think the fan base is kind of on standby mode. If you lose to Boston College, it reverts back to, the setting of the fan base after the Florida State game, in which the fan base pretty much a good amount of them checked out. You lose to Boston College, it's a little bit of a different story because then you lose to a team that you're supposed to beat by double digits, a team that is 1-3 and trending in the wrong direction. Arguably maybe one of the, if not the worst team in the ACC currently through 4 weeks of the regular season. So a lot of this is from a reaction standpoint. I don't really know how to phrase what I'm trying to say here, or what's the best phrase to use. It's from like a public look, I guess you could say. Like if you lose to Boston College, that doesn't look good to the public. It doesn't look good to the media. It doesn't look good to the nation. It definitely doesn't look good to future recruits and things of that nature. Obviously, you're still fighting that recruiting battle to where, these big time recruits that they have committed and are still in the respective commitments for, winning, it definitely does go a long way. Sure, NIL plays a hand in that, but winning is a big portion of that. So, yeah, I mean, I think that losing to Boston College, obviously you halt your momentum that you try to create against South Florida. You dig yourself in a bigger hole when it comes to trying to obtain bowl eligibility. And then Obviously, the fan base gets a little bit more antsy again, and you're going to have to answer questions for a team that, look, I mean, is just simply not good. I mean, I don't like to. I think there's a very fine line when comparing, similar opposition, teams that both teams have played, like Florida State. I think you're playing a fine line. I think that you can, use that when maybe trying to shape expectations, maybe kind of. But I don't like to say Team A beat Team B and Team C lost to Team B. That means Team A should beat Team C because of the um, former results against Team B. I think that it's all about matchups. Any team can win on any given day. Sure, that sounds cliche, but momentum is a thing. In-game momentum is a thing, and you have to come out and you have to put your best foot forward in a contest. So, Boston College looked absolutely horrendous against Florida State, and this is a Florida State team that was missing some key guys, especially Jared Verse on the defensive end, some other defensive linemen. Offensively, they had guys out. Boston College is dealing with some injuries of their own. They got beat by 30 points against the Seminoles, and arguably, if you ask many Louisville fans, they'll tell you we thought that the Cardinals were better against the Seminoles. Obviously, you can't, take that to the bank and say that's why you think that Louisville's going to win this game. But I think that kind of shows you that Boston College, from a talent perspective, I think they're just heading in the wrong direction, for lack of better terms. And I think that this is a game that Louisville should win. Obviously, I think it's the same thing against South Florida. I think that you don't really gain much from it if you do win outside of handling business, getting one win closer to bowl eligibility, and getting another W in the win column, and getting over 500. And I think building that momentum and confidence as well. So, like I said, I feel like a broken record, but not a lot at stake here, not a lot to gain, a decent amount to lose, but it's all about improving confidence and momentum, increasing confidence and momentum, I should say. Let's do a little bit of a deeper dive into the rosters and talk about, the key players to watch for both sides. Same format, 4 players for Louisville, 2 players for the opposition. We'll begin with the Cardinals. We'll do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. This episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to spice up the college football season. It's very, very easy. It allows you to, identify players that you're going to choose in pick'em situations. You can look at the different pick'em choices for your team every single week. Malik Cunningham's number is something on there that I suggest you go search. Some other ones that I like in this week's matchups, I like Drake May for North Carolina, higher than 265.5 passing yards against Virginia Tech, and also Grant Wells under 220 passing yards, even though UNC's secondaries kind of struggled. Go to Underdog, make your own picks. It's easy to play. It's available in over 30 states. Just pick between 2 and 5 players across any team, not just Louisville, and decide if they will finish higher or lower. It's unique. It's very easy. Sign up with the promo code LOCKEDON, all one word, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. Deposit $100, get $100 for free. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com or find the Underdog Fantasy app in the App Store / Google Play. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code LOCKED ON for a $100 deposit match. Get in on the college football pick'em action today. We're talking about the key players to watch for the Louisville Cardinals. There's 4 of them. Well, there's more. But for the sake of this exercise on this Friday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast, there are 4 players to watch. It took a while for the Louisville's rushing attack to get going. Currently through week 4, they are the 14th best rushing attack in the country. My 2 players to watch on offense is seemingly becoming the 2-headed monster in the running back room. That is Tiyon Evans and Trevion Cooley. Now, Boston College is, I wouldn't say good against the rushing attack. Actually, they're not good at all at that in that aspect. I think they're 85th in the country, so the bottom half of the FBS Division One in Louisville. Really doing a good job from that aspect of things. Tiyon Evans, 45 carries, 215 yards on the season, 3 touchdowns. Trevion Cooley, 21 for 109 and a touchdown. Cooley led the way against South Florida with 75 yards on the ground. And is seemingly, battling or kind of getting past that injury that he had early on in the season. Tiyon Evans missed the Florida State game with an injury. He was back last weekend, ran for over 50 yards. And this is a defense that you should be able to, continue to assert your will, right? Louisville's offensive line has been doing a very, very good job of protecting the quarterback and creating gaps for their ball carriers to use. So I think that Tiyon Evans and Trevion Cooley are the players to watch for here on offense. We know what we're getting from Malik Cunningham. He's looking like the Malik Cunningham of last year, to where, he's such a dynamic runner, and then, kind of supplemented that with pretty solid passing as well. He looks solid in certain aspects of passing against South Florida. Now I know that, maybe he made a mistake and it should have been an interception, but hey, we can look into things all we want, and players do make mistakes. They're not going to have a perfect game, but Malik Cunningham, the past couple of games, it's seemingly he's getting more and more comfortable, getting more and more back into the groove of where we're expecting him to be. If Trevion Cooley and Tiyon Evans get into the mix and they start getting high levels of success with the Louisville rushing attack, that opens up a lot of possibility for what this Louisville rushing attack could accomplish. Not only that, what it could set up for the passing attack. And I think that's when Louisville's offense is at its most dangerous, is when the rushing attack is setting the tone and Malik Cunningham's passing is kind of playing off of that. Defensively speaking, defensive back Kei'Trel Clark and defensive end YaYa Diaby. Kei'Trel Clark going up against one of, if not the best wide receiver in the ACC in Zay Flowers. Flowers is a fantastic wide receiver who has done some solid things against Louisville over the years. 29 catches for 330 yards, 11.4 yards per reception, to go along with 3 touchdowns. Leads the team in receptions, yards receiving, and receiving touchdowns. This really doesn't, or it shouldn't, surprise you all that much. Kei'Trel Clark is likely going to be forced to play up against Zay Flowers, even if he's not. Phil Jurkovec is a passer, and this is a Boston College offense that is very, very bad at running the football. So they're going to be forced to, try to spread the ball out and beat Louisville's defense through the air. So, Kei'Trel Clark being the best defensive back on the team, I think that's a matter of, setting the tone of whether that's guarding Zay Flowers, whether that's guarding some other players, in the flat, on the other boundary. Regardless, I think that this is a game for him to really, really help Louisville's defense out here and just trying to take away a whole side of the field. So, Kei'Trel Clark is my first player to watch. Second is YaYa Diaby. Diaby has been very, very solid, over the past handful of games. I believe he leads the team currently in sacks with 4. And Ashton Gelati is trailing right behind him. He has 17 tackles on the season, and he's been very, very solid as a pass rusher. Boston College has one of the worst pass protection units in college football. I think it's like bottom 5 in the country offensive line-wise. They have not been doing a good job of protecting Jurkovec. And a lot of that is injuries. They've been dealing with injuries, guys coming back from injuries, youth, so on and so forth, and just simply not doing good enough at protecting their quarterback, and obviously not really being able to establish much in the rushing attack. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory here. YaYa Diaby is a player to watch, because if he's able to get into the backfield and make it really, really challenging for Phil to throw the football, getting into a rhythm, or even blowing plays up at the line of scrimmage, attacking the gaps and preventing Boston College from essentially getting any input from the running game, which they've struggled to do at all. I think they're averaging less than 2 yards per carry through 4 games, which is incredibly bad. Um, so yeah, Tiyon Evans, Trevion Cooley, the running back tandem are players to watch here. Defensive back Kei'Trel Clark, defensive end YaYa Diaby are the players to watch for the Louisville Cardinals. We'll talk about the Boston College players to watch here in just a second. After I thank you all once again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free on all streaming services, including YouTube, and now WHAS 11 Plus, which you can find on WHAS11.com. Scroll down to the sports section, and you can find all of the Locked On Louisville podcast videos on that website. Don't forget that is 5 days a week, your team every day. Not obviously not this week. I was gone. I'm back in town now. There will be 3 episodes today to conclude the month, 2 Boston College previews, and probably a recruiting episode as well. So just keep an eye out on that. The other 2 will come in the evening. But the 2 players to watch for Boston College here, well, you probably guessed one of them. That is Zay Flowers. I was actually pretty surprised when he came back for his senior season, the 5'10" senior out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. 29 catches on the season, 330 yards, 3 touchdowns, 11.4 yards per carry. One of the best route runners in the country, does a good job of creating separation, just overall very, very solid in almost all aspects of what it takes to be a wide receiver. So he's the player to watch here because Boston College offense has been pretty one-dimensional, and he's been the leader on this Boston College offense in the receiving core. He's Phil Dracovich's best target. His favorite target goes to him, I believe, over half of or over double the amount of the second guy on the roster. So I think that this one's self-explanatory here. You're going up against a secondary that is, it has some solid pieces in it, especially Kei'Trel Clark. And if that's who's going up against Flowers, that battle is going to be one that could really dictate how Boston College does offensively in this one. So I'm going to go with Zay Flowers on offense. Defensively, I kind of went back and forth here. They have some players that struggle here and there. I end up going with Donovan Ezeiruaku. He is one of the more dynamic defensive ends, underclassmen defensive ends in the conference. He has 2 sacks on the seasons. On the season, I can't speak today. 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 14 solo tackles, 21 total. The 6'2" sophomore out of Williamstown, New Jersey, has been pretty solid in creating disruptions for that Boston College defense, especially creating turnovers. It's a unit that isn't abysmal at defending the run and the pass, but I think that it is a defense that's bad enough to where they kind of have to focus on creating turnovers to create some momentum and to win certain games. So I think Ezeiruaku is a player to watch for here to try to create some pressure off the edge, maybe try to keep Malik Cunningham in check when it comes to RPOs, or even, just quarterback scrambles. Obviously, it's easier said than done when trying to guard one of the best dynamic dual threat quarterbacks in the country. So Ezeiruaku is a guy that I actually watched the game against Rutgers, and I thought that overall, he looked pretty solid. He had a sack in that game. He had, I think, 9 total tackles. Looked pretty solid. Now, Boston College as a team isn't really all that good, but when I watched that defense, that was a name that I took away. I was like, ooh, this guy could definitely cause some problems for Louisville in that Week 5 matchup. So here we are, Week 5, and he is the player to watch on defense to go along with wide receiver Zay Flowers for the offensive side of the ball. Like I said, multiple episodes today. I want to give a shout out to the Locked On ACC podcast. No better place to find your conference news than that show, hosted by Candace Cooper. Before we get out of here, I do want to switch to a more serious tone and just extend my thoughts to the the South Florida area, all of those that were affected by the hurricane over the past couple of days. It's been devastating to, see just how many families have been affected by this tragedy, how many areas have been absolutely decimated in terms of infrastructure and things of that nature. Fort Myers Beach, Punta Gorda, Cape Coral, through that area of the Florida coast, even up going through up the coast where it seems to be now, turning into more of a tropical storm, but still, just want to extend the thoughts out to that area as we conclude this show today, and those that are suffering and things of that nature. So that's going to wrap up this first Friday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day, and we'll see you right back here shortly.